Good evening, or hello, wie geht's? My name is Katea Stitt. I'm the program director for WPFW Radio here in Washington, D.C., one of the Pacifica stations. What you may not know about me is that my daughter is half German. Her father's from Frankfurt. I know Klaus is like, yes. So tonight's conversation is particularly close to my heart. She is intending to go to school next year in Germany and is preparing to do that. And so what we're talking about here, longing and belonging and acceptance and migration, immigration, all those things really resonate right now with me as a mother. I am honored, and I want to thank the Goethe-Institut for inviting me to, oh, I'm sorry. When you said start, I thought you needed me to start. Oh, no.
Hello, everyone, again. We heard a little bit already from our wonderful guest, Katea, and I'm so happy to welcome you on behalf of the Goethe-Institut too. And I just want to say a few words before we start. The first thing I want to say is that we are really thankful that the Friends of Goethe-Institut supported this event and helped us financially to organize this and made it possible. I just show you where you can find more information about the Friends of Goethe-Institut. So thank you so much that it was possible to help us with this event. Maybe we have a little applause. Thank you. So, and I'm very warm welcome to you all, and very warm welcome to you, Katea, and you, Mark, for our conversation about the political potential of multiplicity. It's about multiplicity, migration, and social change in Germany and the US. And before we start with this discussion, I just want to mention that the Goethe-Institut organized this festival, Longing, Belonging. And there are some other events coming up. I just briefly want to mention it. There's a film screening on Saturday, and there's a film screening on Monday next week. And both are with talkbacks with the directors, and both with the same topic, and together with our festival, Longing, Belonging. And I want to mention the wonderful exhibition that we not opened officially yet. It's a preview that you can see today, but it's wonderful. The opening will be on Wednesday, October 23rd. And this exhibition is featuring 3 local artists from DC, also to this topic, Longing, Belonging. And now I hand over to you, dear Katea. And I'm so happy. I wanted to introduce you and Mark, but I don't do this now. I say, I wish us a wonderful discussion, and thank you in advance.
Thank you, Tatiana. I'm so sorry, you all. My apologies. Well, I'm going to get right into introducing our esteemed guest. I'm honored to be in discussion with him today. Mark Terkessidis is a freelance author with a focus on popular culture, migration, racism, and social change. He studied psychology and holds a doctorate in education. He was editor of the music magazine Specs, which we discussed, radio presenter for WDR Funkhaus Europa, fellow at the Willem de Kooning Academy, Rotterdam, and lecturer at the University of St. Gallen. He has published numerous articles in newspapers, including Taz, Die Zeit, and Süddeutsche Zeitung. I hope it's okay, my pronunciation there. His latest, this is a long list of German publications, so I'm not going to test that. But it's really an honor and a pleasure to be in conversation with you, and I'm going to turn it over to you at this moment, and then we'll come back and dialogue.
Thank you very much for the invitation and the possibility to speak here tonight in Washington. I haven't been to the United States for 30 years, actually, makes an impression on me. But it's interesting that when I look back to the 90s, when I came here for the first time, the visual impression of the United States is not as striking as it was in those days, because Germany has changed a lot. And if you stroll through German cities these days, they don't look very different anymore from cities in the United States. So you have all kinds of difference, complexities, cultural difference, religious difference. You have big mosques now all over the place, even in central places, in the bigger and even in the smaller cities too. So Germany has really changed a lot. But I mean, if you look at the political system, or if you look to the system of historical system of citizenship and so on, the difference couldn't be more grave between Germany and the United States of America. And then it becomes quite interesting, because Germany, this incredible change in Germany has, it is only 25 years in a way. Because for the first time that German government accepted that Germany is a country of immigration was in 1998. The so-called Red-Green government, Social Democrat and Green Party government, and they said a very interesting sentence. They said there has been an irreversible process of migration to the Federal Republic of Germany. And so, I mean, you hear that word irreversible. So before 98, it was reversible, because the people thought, that the government actually thought it was reversible. Although there were millions and millions of foreign workers living in the Federal Republic, there were like children in the so-called third generation living there, but nevertheless, the political fiction was that was reversible. And then the second thing that happened was the change of citizenship law in 2000, and that was a very important change, because before that, German citizenship law stems from the year 1913, and this citizenship law was almost exclusively based on blood. On blood. You had to be a biological, whatever that meant. You had to be a biological German to be a German citizen. And I mean, this idea of membership is very important. It shapes a nation very much. And so this change to citizenship law comparable to that of the US, that when you are born in Germany, you get German citizenship automatically, that was a very new thing for the Federal Republic of Germany. And only since 2000, in a way, you have the existence of people like me, that you have somebody who is German but of foreign descent. Yeah, my father migrated from Greece to Germany, and now you have Germans with Turkish origin, or you have German with Russian origin or Polish origin, or you have POC Germans and everything, but it is only since 25 years. So this change is really very dramatic, and this idea of homogeneity, the idea we could possibly reverse that, in a way stays still with us. So now we have a populist movement called Alternative für Deutschland, Alternative for Germany, and some of them really believe that the process is still reversible. They don't believe it like they believed it in the 90s. In the 90s there was still fractions of the population who had the idea that Germany is, or the German people are a kind of biological entity, and that the fact that there are foreign people in Germany are actually posing a threat of subversion to the German people, and you have to get rid of these people. And if you have read these right-wing extremist magazines, they had like their 100-day plans to evacuate all foreigners from the Federal Republic. That is not what we have today. So there has been a substantial change even in racism in Germany, because now they only want to get rid of the so-called non-assimilated citizens of Germany. That is something very, very different than all of the so-called foreign population. But nevertheless, this idea of homogeneity still stays with us. And this idea of homogeneity makes everybody who is not of German descent a kind of abbreviation, kind of something you see with kind of suspicion to it. Nevertheless, if you look at I really like these numbers, or to look at the numbers. So even when Germany thought that the process of immigration was reversible, between 1965 and 2015, 71 million people moved to Germany for permanent residence, or had permanent residence and moved away from Germany. 71 million people. So that was actually the population of Germany in these times. If you look at the time before 1965, 12 million refugees of German origin, from the East came to Germany after Second World War. And if you look at 1945, the last year of the Nazi regime, 8 million foreigners were living in in the German Reich in those days. Most of them, for sure, were forced laborers. They were brought to Germany against their will, but nevertheless, that was so ubiquitous that there was some kind of forced labor in every household in the Federal Republic. So it's absolutely nothing new to Germany, although there is the idea that Germany is still homogeneous state, and that is that stays with us over this period. But it has something to do with the fact that it is only 25 years that we have acknowledged that we are a country of immigration. So if it comes to this idea of multiplicity, I really like the idea of multiplicity. There are some ideas I like, but I don't like how they are executed. So in a way, I like the idea of diversity, but when there is talk of diversity in Germany and often in the United States too, they don't mean it, you know. It has some kind of lip service upon it. So multiplicity seems to me like a stronger version of diversity. The same is collaboration. This is more normal to you than it is to Germany, because the collaboration was the expression for the people who collaborated with the Nazi regime during the occupation time. But nevertheless, it does mean working together. But if you look at the political scenery, there is a lot of talk of participation, and you know, people who have experienced the process of participation, they often have the impression that they sit somewhere and they have to discuss things which have been already decided by the political power. So you need a stronger idea, and that is collaboration. Multiplicity. When there is talk of diversity in Germany, and these are two expressions: Vielfalt and Vielheit. And Vielfalt, diversity, is always addressed as something. There are people who are against immigration, populist movements, and so on, and you have to talk to them to take them on a journey to a better Germany, and you tell them these people coming from different countries are going to enrich us. There is some cultural enrichment in all this, but nevertheless, this kind of liberal discourse gives you the impression that you have a choice. So you can choose from very different cultural enrichments, but that is not the case. You know, if you look at the population in German cities right now, if you look at the population in cities like Stuttgart or Frankfurt or so on, then and if you look at the kids under 6 who are going to school next year, 75% of them are of so-called immigration background. That is our statistical tool, immigration background. That is like race in the United States, and that means you have to have at least one parent who him or herself migrated personally to the Federal Republic of Germany. One parent. Then you have the so-called immigration background. And 75% of the children now next year going to school in Frankfurt or Stuttgart, and even in a lot of smaller cities, in every city in the western part of Germany, for historical reasons, the children with an immigration background are the majority. So that is a dramatic demographic change. That is a change which affects everything, because there is no homogeneity. It is clear, but there is no common history. There is no. You can't say we're all from one. We're all from one family. No, we're not. We're not from one family. We are not even all responsible for the Holocaust. Some are not, because they were born in another country. So how do you deal with all that? How do you deal with this situation? And that was the moment when I thought I should address that as multiplicity, because there is no choice. There is no choice. That is the reality of the Federal Republic now in 2024, that we have to deal with this multiplicity. And there is no going around that multiplicity. There is no avoiding that multiplicity. There is no reversing that multiplicity. And the idea we usually deal with immigration in Germany is the idea of integration. And personally, I think that doesn't work at all anymore, because that was still the idea that there is a core population of Germans, and these Germans all have the right preconditions for the living in Germany, and then there are these foreigners coming to the Federal Republic, and they need, in a way, to be taught to have the right preconditions, and then there is something like an hour zero, and we all start together to new horizons, and that doesn't work anymore. And it is very interesting if you have a look at this discourse about integration in Germany. You have for 40 years now. You have some classic problems. Language. They don't speak our language. The other point is they live in patriarchal structures. That is the second classic, and the third is they live in some kind of ghetto structure, now called parallel society. So, but if you address these same problems for 40 years, then you have to ask yourself, what did we do wrong? So there must be some kind of development. But no, there's no development, because you only see these problems all the time. And that has to do with this idea of homogeneity. Everything German is good, everything else is different, and different is bad, and so we have to do some kind of integration. That doesn't work anymore. So the idea of diversity in the better version, or the idea of multiplicity, contains a complete change of perspective, and that perspective says, okay, when there is multiplicity, we don't ask all these other peoples if they are like us, but we ask our own institutions, organizations, and so on, if they are actually fit for the multiplicity of the society. And they are not. And they are not. They are not from the stuff they have, because that doesn't fit anymore. If you look at the administration stuff, it doesn't fit anymore with the city with like 60% of people with an immigration, so-called immigration background. If you look at the schools, the stuff doesn't fit. If you look at their consciousness about migration, their consciousness about racism, and so on, it doesn't fit anymore, so there has to be a lot of organizational change. But that is a different perspective. It is not the perspective, how should we change these people, but how should we change the institutions in which we live together? And that is a very, very different. Approach. Last point, and then we can go into the discussion. I mean, interesting thing about Germany is that our Grundgesetz, the constitution, basic law, very different from the United States. It was not given to us by the people themselves. It was imposed on us by a lost war. And the people who wrote this basic law, which is very interesting, were like 1 year before they were all opponents to the Nazi regime, and 1 year before they had been like sentenced to death as traitors. And after that, they wrote the basic law, the Grundgesetz, Constitution for the Federal Republic of Germany. And after that, this constitution, there was no referendum or poll for. There was no referendum for this constitution, because the Allies actually, and probably they were right, feared that the German population, heavily involved in the Nazi regime, would vote against that constitution. Too democratic for the German people in those days. So what happened was that this basic law, this Grundgesetz, was imposed on Germany with all these individual rights, with all these ideas of democracy, and it was a learning process. It was a learning process. We all learned it in 50, 60 years to like support this basic law. But I think that is really interesting. That is really interesting if it comes to immigration too. So I really can't stand in front of somebody who has migrated to Germany and tell him, you should follow our Grundgesetz, you should follow our basic law. That is not possible, because it is not our basic law, actually. It is now our basic law. It has become our basic law, and it could become his or her basic law too. Yeah, because they are now involved in another learning process. But that is interesting, isn't it? That there is all this learning in this process of accepting the basic law. Second point is basic law was learned by protest. I mean, I went to Washington today, and I mean, it's quite fashionable in the US too, but nevertheless, there's if you go to the Museum of African American History, there's all this like how activism shaped the US. If you see like if you see like the memory plates, and they say like the suffragettes, how they protested shaped American culture, and then you go to other places, and all over the place there's this idea that activism has shaped and it's the same in Germany, that activism has shaped the Germany we live in now. So all the ideas we have about memory culture, we are very proud of our memory culture, that we now like remember the Holocaust properly. But that was the result of a fight. That was the result of a fight in the 60s. And the people who fought for that, they were considered sometimes enemies of the state. And if you think about health, the ideas of health we now have in Germany, that was a fight before we had this idea of health, we now think it's self-evident. It's not. Our ideas of education, all this, our ideas of social rights, our ideas of gender, and so on. So that is all some kind of process, protest process, activism process, militancy even, which led to the change of the federal republic. And I mean, now you have a very paradox situation, because the same people who used to fight this activism, they now take pride in these results and tell immigrants that they should obey to this. I mean, that is a very paradox situation we have now with the fight against anti-Semitism. When now very conservative forces in Germany have in a way captured the memory of the Holocaust. They were the people in the 60s and 70s that memory of the Holocaust had to be fought against very, very often. And now they say, okay, now all these immigrants from Arabic countries come to Germany, and we have the fear that they are all anti-Semites, and so they should, in a way, obey to the German memory culture about the Holocaust. And that can't be the idea. You can't. It's not the idea that you freeze this and take pride in the activism you didn't actually fight in those days. So I think I stop here and we have a discussion.
Well, I just learned a lot, but I also heard a lot of parallels with the United States. You know, when it's very interesting when you talk about the other in, well, if I could back up and ask you the question I asked you before we got started, which is, because, you know, fields like this, it's usually an event or a moment that cause you to want to look deeper and more closely at who you are and who the society is. And what led you to this work initially?
A lot of things. So they're all coming to me now. Okay, my father migrated to Germany from Greece, and he married a German woman, actually, because I was born in '66, and the dictatorship came to Greece in '67 and lasted till '74. I was born in Germany with a German mother, but we didn't go to Greece. Because my father considered it to be too dangerous to go to Athens in those days. I was born in Germany, and I only spoke German, and it was completely clear for me that I'm German. You know, that you don't think about that when you are a child. But interesting thing for me that in school I was already a lot of times addressed as somebody who is Greek. And the teacher asked me, so how is it in Greece, this and that? And I had to tell him, okay, well, I don't know, I haven't been to Greece. So, and then there was one teacher who even had the idea that I should know something about antiquity, you know. So because that runs through my veins, because I am Greek, you know. And so there is something, so this process of othering was so all over the place, especially in school, and it is still today. I mean, I met one parent of Turkish origin, and he told me, okay, I have the feeling my children come from school more Turkish every day, you know. So because they are constantly addressed as somebody, so you know there is a child and the child has to come in front of the class and please tell us something about Islam. And the child, okay, maybe the family is religious, maybe the family is not religious. But even if the family is religious, the child can't explain anything. You know, it's something that is simply done in class. But now I'm going to, and so this othering, you are this and you are considered to be that and you are considered to be a foreigner, but in those days, every person who was of a name Terkessidis or something, some other names or complexities or so, was considered to be a foreigner, not belonging to the Federal Republic of Germany. So if anybody asked you, where do you come from, they actually meant it. They meant you don't come from here. You know, it was not very nice. And what led me to investigate racism was like the beginning of the 90s, because in 1991 there were like great attacks on refugee camps in the Federal Republic. That was like in Hoyerswerda, in Rostock, and then it spread to the western parts of Germany. And where I lived in Cologne, very near to it, there's a small city like Solingen, and the Nazis burned a house, and 5 people of Turkish origin died. In there. And so we were so shocked about all this, and Germany had a discourse in those days that this is some kind of youth violence. So it's not racism. It's some kind of youth violence. It's like strange youth. They are spoiled by the ideas of '68, and now they are like out of control and protesting against their 68er parents, and so in the East. That didn't make sense at all, but nevertheless, it was the discourse, and there was no talk about racism, and we had to address that. So, and then the whole activism in writing and so on started because we had like to have a discourse about racism, and we didn't have that at all, even in the left, nothing.
Thank you. And you know, many of the things you said draw parallels. For instance, and I'm sure you've seen it in our own news coverage, when there is something where, so as an African American person, I am the other. When I'm in Germany, as I mentioned to you, my daughter is half German. When I am there, I am the other. But I'm not treated like the other because I'm American. I'm African American. When I'm there with my African friends, they are in front of me treated like the other. Or my Turkish friends, they're treated like the other. And even, as I mentioned to you, my daughter's grandfather, lovely man, and he's, you know, he tells me all the time how much he loves Paul Robeson and how much he loves gospel music. And then when I go to go to the Imbiss to get food, he's like, why would you eat with those people? And I was shocked, and I had to tell him, I said, Manfred, I am those people in America. I am those people in America, and he got it. So how do we, and so it's a globalized world, right? I mean, you know, how do we create this radical society where there is no other? And the other part of that is we actually need if we're gonna say the other, right? All of these societies, and some of it is steeped in colonialism, some steeped in imperialism, some steeped in white supremacy, but all of our societies in the West actually rely on the quote-unquote other. Our societies would not function at the level that they do if there were not for people moving and migrating and emigrating. It would not function. So how do we get to this space where there is no other? We are just, in fact, a society that thrives and accepts all cultures, but does not force assimilation. We don't want to be assimilated. We don't want to forget who we are. We just want to bring all of our whole selves to the table. How, in your opinion, do we get to that?
That is a big question, isn't it?
You're a smart researcher, though.
So yeah, I mean, how do we abolish class? I mean, it's like that question is a little bit, in a way, it's a little bit too big for me. But I mean,
but even on the local level, let's just take, you know, just the local level. What type of civic engagement do we need to see? What work do we need to do on ourselves so that we don't see ourselves, and now when I say, I mean nationalism here, so we don't see ourselves as a center, but just one of the parts, you know?
I don't think I don't think if that is only an individual problem. I mean, I'm quite interested to implement it in the school. That should be an because there more than one thing about schools. In school, they are all together. they're still all together, and they enter the school most of the time, these children don't have this kind of like hard idea of identity when they enter, but when they leave, they definitely have. Yeah, they definitely have. And so I mean, where is the protest? Where is the activism there? So we don't, we like, I think that the American school system is quite problematic, but the German school system is too. We are very proud of our school system, but nevertheless it is very, very selective. It is very, very selective. If you look at, I mean, if you look at the children who come from a working class background, or children who come from immigration and both parents had immigrated to Germany, they are 1 to 2 school years behind the pupils who are from an academic background. 1 to 2 school years in mathematics as in German. So why don't we protest that? How is it possible that there's so many reports about racism in schools? I mean, I don't think that every teacher has to enter the school with the total consciousness of being an anti-racist. But nevertheless, when racism occurs in schools, what is going to happen then? I mean, does the system have some kind of systematic approach to racism? And in German schools, we can say, no, it doesn't. It doesn't have that. And why does it? Why, how is that possible that it doesn't have that systematic approach? So there are a lot of things we can do for the better in, for example, education. We can do a lot of things in health. We can do a lot of things all over the place, and it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to involve always the big question: how can we do it all at the same time?
Well, we can't really do it all at the same time. It's interesting you mentioned school. I mean, you see the movement here, right? We repress now through critical race theory, or the removal of critical race theory, which is just the history of America, really, what we're talking about. I mean, genocide of the American Indian, enslavement of African peoples. I, for one, and this is my ignorance, I guess, always thought that in that way, Germany was more open, because you talked about the ugliness of the Holocaust. You talked about those things, whereas America, you know, even now in textbooks, it's very, you know, you have a chapter on slavery, like one chapter on slavery. Unless, you know, if you're fortunate enough to go to a more elite school, the education might be different, but in a public setting, a public school setting, not very much time is spent on the genocide of the Native American, on the enslavement of the African, on the oppression of women, you know. And so we have the revert, you know what I mean? Like, we have a mechanism theoretically for dealing with racism, except we embed racism in the school system. So in that way, how does one get to a place where, again, all histories, I don't know if in Germany, the histories of the other are discussed, for instance, in school. If you're from Turkey, is there real historical knowledge imparted? Or if you're from Iran or Syria, et cetera, does that kind of education happen? And is there an opening for that kind of education to happen? Because you're right, at the school level, the elementary level is really where it should begin.
Well, I mean, yeah, Germany has this very special memory culture in comparison to other nations. I mean, the memory culture in Germany is based on the memory of incredible national crime. So, and that makes it very different, without a doubt. if you look to France, or if you look to the Netherlands, or to United Kingdom, to the US, there's a very big difference there, and that is an accepted thing, even if it comes to colonialism now. There was a discussion that we have to include colonialism into the German memory culture, because although German colonialism in overseas ended in 1919, nevertheless it lingered into the German culture, and even then there was the genocide in now Namibia of the Herero and Nama, and so there was a very fast process of implementing that into the German memory culture as the third pillar of memory, beside Holocaust and the dictatorship of German Democratic Republic, and so that something to be proud of. That definitely. On the other side, if you look at the Second World War, it was an imperialist war which conquered a lot of European countries, and I personally would consider that as a kind of adjacent colonialism, or the attempt to adjacent colonialism. And if you want to talk about the 3.3 million Soviet prisoners of wars who died of starvation in German camps, 3.3 million died of starvation in German camps. It is near to impossible to address that. So there is a memory culture, but some memories are more important than others. Serbia lost 10% of its population. Greece lost 7% of its population during the German occupation. All this doesn't have the same. It is not a pillar of our memory culture. So but nevertheless, you are right. There is something you can build upon. Right. There is something you can build upon. Yeah, and that is something positive.
If we could go to a little bit of your music activism, that piece, if you don't mind. Well, we were talking about it, and music is one of the best ways, really, I find, to approach many of these difficult subjects in ways that words sometimes fail us. How is that integration happening? As I mentioned to you, I was in Germany a lot in the 90s, tour managing, and so there were all sorts of American bands playing there. What I find now, I've gone back now as a jurist for the German Jazz Prize, not so many, at least not from America, not as many foreign bands. It's really a German jazz culture that has overtaken. So in some ways it's a reverse, right? Because it seemed very open, and now it's kind of closed. Is this not only in jazz, but in general, this kind of colonialism, if you will, or imperialism in the music? How has that worked to improve the society, having access to multiplicity of artists from around the world, or do you think that it's had the reverse effect? It was very open, or it felt very open in the 90s, and now it feels more closed today?
Do you think it's more closed today?
I do.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you. Yeah, go ahead. No.
Please don't.
Because back then, you could be, as an American band, you could be on tour and you'd run into so many other ensembles from not only America, but around the world. I remember for the first time seeing Stella Chiweshe from Zimbabwe in Germany, and so many other situations like that. And now when I go, it's hardly any, it's mostly European bands, and let's speak specifically in jazz now, mostly European bands, and mostly German, not even European, but German, which on the one hand, I love that these spaces have cropped up, because I did feel then that kind of the German musician was marginalized, and it was more wanting the American, you know what I mean? Like, if you were gonna have a jazz festival, you had to have the American expression. And now they've found their own voice in this music and are promoting that. At the same time, it feels more closed to me, that there's not that opportunity for as much cross-cultural sharing and development. Which ultimately leads to society where that, you know what I mean? Because you take it away from the cultural space, and it moves into, daily lives, ways of thinking, ways of being.
Okay, I mean, one problem, one difference now between, if it comes to music, now we have talk music, we would talk only music then. I mean, if you compare the 90s to now, there was so many there was a lot of structure. There were like bars and clubs and there was money and you could apply for money and there was approximately no taxation. Very important. There was approximately no taxation. If you had somebody from the United States over, you could give them the money and they could bring it back to the United States. In the last 30 years, this in a way structure died because people got old. It was not so important to them. The younger people weren't that interesting. Sometimes they got old and they kept to their structure, which kept the younger people out, also a problem, and so on. So this actually died, and then there was the taxation problem because there was this Quellensteuer. What is that called? You have to pay like immediately 25% to the state when you have a foreign artist there, which made it less attractive to bring people over. And I think that there was a provincializing in this whole structure. Second thing is that that Germany had a jazz movement of its own in free jazz, for example. And that is quite interesting because when, for example, Peter Brötzmann died sometime,
he came to
and he was internationally, he was one of the most famous musicians Germany had. And if you look at his obituaries in Germany, it was like, oh, there was this guy and he really played really this kind of machine gun music, and it was hard to listen to, but nevertheless he was one of us and I have to write an obituary. So that was and that was quite interesting that this very, very German European movement was not accepted, and in a way that was part of the 60s, and it was the voice of the voiceless. And that was the same thing in jazz, but the same thing with pop music too, that a lot of pop music in the 70s and 80s was the voice of people who didn't have a voice. Youth didn't have a voice, so they had a voice in music. And now it has become like a bougie hobby, and it is like jazz especially. It is all people from very good families. They always had money. Their parents, they have the idea that art is a nice thing to do for the children, and they went all to the conservatory, and their music sound exactly like that. And so that makes the second part of maybe this impression you have right now.
Yeah. But how can we use culture? So whether we're talking about music, art, visual art, literature, whatever it is, in the service of creating this kind of multiplicity that we want to see?
I don't know. Can we use it? There was if you look at the history of jazz, or if you look at the history of pop rock music and so on, there was a specific historical moment when this music was able to transmit through very, very capitalistic channels a message of something else. Mm-hmm. But it was, in a way, it was the historical moment where that was possible, and it is not possible to reproduce that. So you can have your own musical activism, and I still want to do that too. Mm-hmm. But nevertheless, I'm quite skeptical if that is if you can change things with that. Yeah,
that's I don't know. I think you can change things with it. But
Maybe you can give me an example, and then
well, I think about in Germany, not necessarily, but because I don't know. I mean, I know Albert Mangelsdorf, I know Peter Boltzmann, but I think about Fela Kuti. I don't know how many of you all know the Nigerian artist Fela Kuti, and how his music, and today's his birthday, by the way. Actually, his music informed. I know here, those of us that think of ourselves as radical, whatever that means, or progressive, or whatever, or having consciousness, informed so many of us that we could struggle and we could fight and we have to sacrifice to do it, just through his music, you know, through the titles. Same thing with Bob Marley, when you think about it. I remember first encountering Bob Marley at 18, and hearing him in like a pub at Georgetown University, and I could not believe what he was singing about and what he was able to sing about, which, to your point, now people are not singing about these concepts, are they? You know, they're very safe. We see the silence. We hear the deafening silence from artists today, who are definitely not using their voices in service to liberation of any kind, in service to true integration of any kind. So this is why I say that I think that, you know, and you look at the civil rights movement here in America, music was a huge part of that. You know, and this is your talk, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but I do want to talk about Dr. Bernice Johnson Reagan, who maybe some of you know. She was a historian, founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock, and she just passed about a month ago, 2 months ago, I guess. They just had her funeral. But she talks about how before she was one of the SNCC singers, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, they were in the Deep South in Mississippi. She said she was afraid for her life every single day that they traveled, because at any moment they could be murdered and no one would care and nothing would be done. And they would sing as a part of the protest. And the first time she went to jail, she was terrified, Mississippi, and she started singing. And because people were used to singing in the movement, people joined in, you know, this is the way they kept themselves together. But she said that is when she found her voice and her purpose. And she built this group that's 50 years later still together, based on the songs they sang in the civil rights movement, and believing that freedom was possible, even if physically you're not free. If you can free the mind through song, if you can free the mind through some sort of artistic endeavor, there is the possibility that you can change society. So that is why I differ with you. I see what you're saying, though, and today it does not happen, sadly. Yeah, it's a moment. As a journalist, if I can ask you about that too, because we know that media, journalism shapes hugely how we see the other, or if there is an other. So what role can we play, since we are part of the media? What role do we play in either moving towards the alleviation of this problem, so that or the eradication of this problem, so there is not an other? And I would say most recently we see the example of actually doubling down on the other in our journalistic channels, in our media.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing. I don't have a lot of positive things to say about the media, to be true.
Neither do I, and I work in it.
I don't know who has in these days. I mean, the problem is that I mean, there's this paradox, see, in media coverage in Germany, maybe all over the West, that on the one side they are actually promoting polarization. And they're promoting it because it is successful for them to stir up emotions, and that is what they do. That is not the traditional coverage of a topic we had before. That was never objective in a way, no? But nevertheless, it was the idea that the journalists had to be neutral, and they changed it into another concept that you have to, in a way, invent a narrative to emotionalize people. Yeah, you have to see and hear something that is like. Yeah, you know, you get emotions with it, and that is what they try to do. it is actually not successful. Yeah? That is the most interesting thing, is that all this old media is in complete crisis. Television, newspapers, radio, everything is in complete crisis, but nevertheless they follow this path even harder. So I really like. I have no idea how to change that. I saw that in German broadcasting, where they where they went to reform the programs, and they reformed it again, and then you had the impression that they were more concerned with the reform of the program than they were concerned with the outside world, and it's really hard to say. But I mean, they're living off polarization, and the paradox thing is that on the other hand, they are like complaining about it. You know, when you look at the commentaries, they often say, "Oh, there's too much polarization in this society. We shouldn't be so polarized. It is the populist movements who polarize things. It's the alternative for Deutschland." I mean, there was even like it was so funny that there was like media coverage of a so-called Russian program, and the Russians are stirring up emotions of fear in Germany, and they do that via telegram and so on. And you thought, okay, I mean, you are stirring up emotions all the time, and so we don't need the Russians to have fear. Yeah? It is even statistically you can prove it that like in most parts of the world the criminality rates did go down from the 90s to now, and the coverage about criminality has went up to like 500%. So you have a situation where people are constantly in some kind of culture of fear, and that is very problematic. And I mean, in a way, this collaboration concept, you need more places like this. You need actually to open up the cultural spaces, like the museums or the theaters, to have like situations like this, because in the like personal situation, people are not as polarized as they are in social media. That is really something that happens. So I think we even with the extremists. I think we should talk with them. Yeah. It's like, and what that is. I mean, I really remember that is like 10 years ago, and that was the conference about democracy in, I don't know, let it be Frankfurt or somewhere around Frankfurt. And there was one guy, we were talking about migration and so on, and there was one guy, and he wanted to talk, and he said, I'm this guy, and I want to say something. And then like 4 people around him like stood up immediately and said, this guy, he doesn't have the right to talk because he's an extremist, and we don't want him to talk. So and I said, okay, because I was sitting in front, and I said, okay, I'm not in fear. Please let him have his moment. I mean, what? And he said, okay, I'm against immigration and so on. And he asked me what I have to say, and I told him what I have to say. Yeah? And so after that, he came to me and talked to me and so on. The others were like, we were like in a bubble because I was talking to this extremist and so on. And so I was avoided too. And that was like a crazy situation. 10 years later, this same guy is leader of the Alternative for Deutschland in Hessen, and like has 20% of the voters. And so, I mean, wouldn't it have been better to talk with him? Yeah. So better talk with them and make your point. What we have now is like you don't talk to them, but you take their political positions. Right. Yeah. That is the crazy thing that now the government actually has the same ideas about immigration as the Alternative for Deutschland. So that is like I don't know. And I really have problems to understand that.
Thank you. Yes. What, in your opinion, what would a radically open society look like? I mean, just if you could imagine it, even one where. As kind of we started, where all people are honored, where there is no other, where we don't leave who we are at the door as we enter, but we bring our full selves to that space. What would that look like?
I mean, it's
or do you know
that is in a way a vision too big for me, because I'm like that would like I mean, maybe we will get the revolution, because when there is no reform, no, there's always at some point there's always a revolution. But I used to be on the reform side of things. So I mean, even small steps are steps. The idea is a society. I don't know if that will be the society where there is no other at all. But I mean, it is a society where you can enter any institution as a person, and people in these institutions are living that with the paradox of the other. That means that somebody is completely equal, and on the other side, you have to think about the background of this person to make him or her equal. So that it's paradoxical. I mean, because you have to value the also the difference. Right. So, and if that kind of stance would be in every institution in our state, that would be the stance in the education system, in the health system, in the administration, that would be a huge step. Mm-hmm. That would be, and actually, I don't find it that complicated. Yeah. I don't find it that complicated.
Have you ever, in your studies, have you ever come across any small portion of that or a glimmering of that happening somewhere?
I mean, if they're like, if you look at, if there are many schools are so different in the Federal Republic now, it is really incredible. So there are very, very good schools and very, very bad schools. And if you look at the very, very good schools, even if they deal with a very diverse with very diverse pupils, socially and ethnically, they are able to do that job. And you can see I can name a few. And even the basic school my son went to in Berlin Kreuzberg, and in his class there were like 60% of the pupils who did get transfer Social Security from the state. And that is a huge number, but nevertheless, they were able to implement a system of. Okay, it's very complicated to explain in English because I don't know these pedagogical expressions in English. But it was possible to implement a very, very good system of valuing differences, seeing differences, seeing problematic differences, and treating everybody equal. That was very, very interesting to see that. Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting to see that. And it's possible. We have the concepts, actually.
Right.
We have the pedagogical concepts to do that. If we would fund our schools properly, and if we would implement these concepts, we would take a huge step towards that society. I don't understand why we don't do that.
And well, you know, if we can, just for another moment, why do you think I mean, there are many reasons, and we can talk about, in our country, we can talk about capitalism, for instance, being one of the major reasons that we don't have equity. We talk about equality, but we don't have equity where everyone gets what they need to come up to whatever standard there is, right? And that you also may not be the standard, we as a state, or we as the citizens, or the ones indigenous to, we're not indigenous, but the ones who claim that we are Americans, we're the standard. So we start centering ourselves. But in Germany, what do you think the reasons are that such a simple thing cannot be embraced and implemented?
Yeah, in Germany, it's not capitalism actually. I mean, if you look at the discussion, now, most of the bigger companies, leaders of the bigger companies, the research institutions, mostly promoting free economy. they're all saying the same thing to the government. The schools doesn't work. The schools don't work. You have to have more equity at school. The discussion about migration we have now is absolutely counterproductive, and they're doing it. And so, I mean, it's not about capitalism.
No.
It is like It's
in the States, it's about capitalism, but what is it there?
For me, it really becomes hard to explain. I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. It is a mixture of. You have dilettantism, on the side of the politicians. I mean, I remember when they ratified the UN agreement on the rights of disabled people. Then they had to implement inclusion in German schools, which was absolutely not implemented before, because we had a school system where all disabled people were segregated into special schools. That was our system of dealing with disabled people, and so the politicians actually said to the schools, so now you have to implement inclusion, and we don't want to pay for that. So they left these special schools. They told the schools to implement, because they were by law obliged to implement that, and they didn't want to pay anything. So it went catastrophic, and you had a lot of parents, wealthier parents, who then were in fear of their children, like now they all these disabled people in the regular school system, and they could be an infection for my kid or something like this. And this is so absurd, because I mean, if something decides about your future in Germany, it is if you have two parents who are academic. If you have two parents who are academic, your future is good. It's like it's simple like that, no? Because I mean, my son has two parents who are academic. He's fine. He can be a donkey. He's fine. So there is no reason to worry that much about. But nevertheless, they worried a lot. So there is the dilettantism. There's politicians who don't know about the education system. Yeah. So even the people who are concerned with the education system don't know anything about the education system. I mean, I can give you a list of remarks of German politicians in education who are, and then there is one very decisive point that Germany thinks that diversity is responsible if the schools fail. Yeah, so we didn't change. Everybody said from the 90s on, German school system has to change. They didn't change it at all, and so the results are bad. Even in the international competition, the results are bad. But they have an explanation, because diversity is becoming even bigger.
Of course.
So. And as long as this explanation works for them and for the politicians, it still works. You have a very big problem, because actually our system is good, and it is because of these children that our system is not good, and so they don't have to face their own dilettantism.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Nevertheless, I mean that is explanation. But after like 30 years during COVID, the results were even worse than before.
It was like,
So yeah,
same thing. Is it okay if I open it up to some? Tatiana's ready to questions.
Yeah. Is anybody? Yes.
Thank you for an interesting discussion. I have a couple of points, and since you were talking a lot about music, I'll go there first. And it's deals with the multiplicity of a different kind. One of the few American successes in foreign policy after World War II was this unique jazz, Voice of America jazz program. It's called Jazz Hour, hosted by the legendary Willis Conover, who's got the most distinctive voice. And when I talk about multiplicity, was at the height of the Cold War, he had more listeners in Russia than anywhere else. My entire jazz education sitting in India came from him. And he didn't promote just American jazz greats like Clark Terry and Miles Davis. He also promoted Mango Santa Maria in Cuba. I love that name, Mango Santa Maria. And Namislawski Quartet, I still remember the names, from Czechoslovakia. And it was a very unique program, which unfortunately died. And as I say, frankly, one of the few successes of American soft power and foreign policy. The other thing I want to mention, you mentioned about assimilation, and I got a sense you were saying it in a pejorative sense, in the sense that, when I first came to this country, the operative phrase for people behaving in a cohesive manner was the melting pot. It acquired a bad connotation because people thought what that meant was you surrender your individual cultural identities and then you become like a robot and everyone is the same. I don't see it that way. And I see a contrast between the identity. We were talking about identity politics just before the show started here. And that's what we have come to in this country. We think in terms of what's good for the Hispanics, what's good, you're pandering to certain sections of society and not thinking of what is good for the country. So for me, the melting pot means, okay, you sink your individual differences when it comes to thinking about what's good for the country. So I think there is a place for that. You can still have multiplicity, diversity, but in certain critical situations, you need to think about the country and not about your individual identity.
But I mean, let me get again to this idea of multiplicity. It is actually not about groups. It is about individuals. It is about individuals with different backgrounds and different preconditions and different frames of references. And so if you think about the institutions, what I was talking about before, the institutions should address these individuals as equal individuals with different backgrounds, preconditions, and frames of reference. So, and that would be my idea about multiplicity, that you have to change the institution to serve the individuals living in one society. Yeah, nevertheless, you can think about the country. But I mean, that may be easier for the US than for the Europeans now, because we have that construction now with country and the European Union, and so it's like, what is? We still wonder what it is actually. In what political system do we actually live now? Is it Germany or is it the European Union? Actually, the Union has influence on 80% of the legislative process in every European country. So we can think of ourselves as very sovereign. We are not. And so that is another point. But I mean, you're right. I don't think that it is healthy to think about the society in terms of what can we do for this and that and that and that group. That is too easy. That is too easy, even for this group, because there was a poll in Germany that was called Sinus-Studie, and actually that was a poll about values, and they did a poll with the so-called population with immigration background, and one interesting thing is that if you think about it, the first thing coming to mind is that the values in one ethnic group must be approximately the same, and it is not true, because the difference in values in one ethnic groups were bigger than in between. ethnic groups. And you see that there are many other factors for the values you have than only ethnicity. So that is a very bad thing to address, like all the time people because of their ethnic background. That makes a homogenization of groups which is actually not there.
Could I just add to that? I would say that I agree with you that we have to think about the bigger things. Like we talked about this, right? We all want decent housing. We all want free access to healthcare. We want good schools for our children. But what we know, for instance, in America, growing up, I was always taught that, and certainly my parents before me even more so, that as an African American, right, we had to take on the cloak, if you will, of white America to be accepted and to leave whatever our particular things were at the door when you enter that space, or you would not be expected, nor would you even be able to matriculate in advance. So when I say, and you know, we see this again and again, so I'm not at all saying that, I think identity politics is horrible. And this is what we've become, you know, pandering to this one, that one, the other. What we should be looking for is really how do all boats rise, and how do we meet people where they are, so their experience, their backgrounds, their knowledge base. The other thing is, as Americans or Europeans, this whole notion that somehow, and this is where global white supremacy, and I say this not meaning you don't have to be white to practice white supremacy. Sometimes people think you're talking about white people. Anyone can practice white supremacy. But it's just this feeling that the way that you are the standard and everyone else should meet that. When in fact, what we see happening now is we are centering other people. That is, you see this happening in America. Like no more is heterosexual white male the center. The center is shifted, and that's a good thing. Because that standard, frankly, should have never been. That should have never been the standard. So that's what I mean. In terms of Willis Conover, I actually knew him. I met him. And my father was a jazz musician, and he was so proud. And this is how I learned about other parts of the world. He would, every time he'd travel, he'd bring me a doll from wherever he came from. And I didn't know what he meant even at like 8 years old, but he'd say, "I've been behind the Iron Curtain 8 times. And I was like, wow, that sounds exciting. I had no idea what the Iron Curtain was until much later. I remember finally when I went to Berlin for the first time after the wall, you know, and going there and really understanding as an adult, you know, like 23 or something, what that really meant, you know. But I think jazz is, if we have a good export, jazz has been that export. It has been the thing that has caused people everywhere in the world to see our humanity.
Unfortunately, it started with people escaping racism here and going to France.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you, sir.
It started the jazz, evangelical movement began with black artists escaping the racism here to go to France.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, Sidney Bechet, so many had to become expatriates to even be recognized here. They weren't valued here. And then they look at Josephine Baker. She's like the preeminent example, you know, one of them.
Well, thank you so much for this interesting discussion. I was fortunate to travel a lot when I was younger and went behind the Iron Curtain 7 times. And I knew what it was. But anyways, I think one of the difficulties of trying to bring more equity and equality among people is there's such a lack of good communication. I mean, I think you look in the newspapers now, I mean, who reads the opinion section? I do, but I'm older, and maybe that's because why. And then so much of communication now is through very brief things that you can send on your phone back and forth, where there's no chance to actually try to do anything nuanced in a 2 or 3 or 4 sentence. And it's just, to me, it's just such a shame that so much is lost by not better communication, and keeping things so superficial. And I won't go on forever, but the other thing that struck me is the mention that there's not much discussion on political impact and effects anymore. I still read the Washington Post editorial section, but one place where you briefly can get it really, and I think it's something that would be more appealing to many people, the comics. Some of the comic strips are very brief and very poignant. There's been one going on against, I'm not a Trump fan. There's one going on for quite a long time, and I just love that. And so it makes my Sunday, and I'll stop.
I think sure. Yep. Maybe you want to comment first.
No, I just remember a kind of seminar I did with journalists some times ago, 10 years or so, and it was about how to cover migration in broadcasting, radio, public radio in Germany. And I mean, one amazing thing was that these young journalists, they were so opinionated, although they didn't know anything about it. But they were very opinionated. So we had discussions, although they didn't know anything. And in a way, that was like that was the new thing coming, you know. So people very, very, very opinionated, although they don't have a clue about anything. And that is something. I mean, I don't know. I really have. In a way, I'm really struggling with that. So I get mails from an activist group. They're like Palestine activism, and so on. I just read it. I'm interested in what they are doing, and they have a reading group. And there was this remark that, please, if you come to the reading group, read at last one of the articles. Yeah? And that is interesting that people go to a reading group and that it's even not books, it's just articles. And they go to the reading group without having read one article. And that is something, I don't know how to deal with that. Yeah, I mean, I'm 58 too. So it's like, that is a strange thing.
I would say, if I just can add to that, in general, reading has declined, right? Young people, you know, when we were, because I'm 60, so I'll tell, like, when we were growing up, this sounds like a simple thing, but when we were growing up, there was such a thing as a variety show. So you might have, you know, the king of some country next to a George Carlin, let's say, like a comedian, next to Aretha Franklin, next to, you know, some scientist. And they were all talking together. And as a kid watching that, you learned that there was all these interesting things in the world. Young people don't have that anymore. They have social media. The interesting thing about it, which is scary, this is where they're getting their interesting information. Sometimes it's where they're getting their facts, which is worse because they're not reading. Radio, you know, we struggle with public radio across the landscape. And of course, PFW is left of center, so we don't expect to be as popular as the NPR stations. But even NPR, radio listening has declined. So now everything is so specialized. You can go right to the only thing that you know and are interested in, which means that you don't learn about the rest of the world. You have no concept, no context. You know, you're not reading the Sunday Times and looking at books that you might want to pick up. That's gone, you know, and so you're right. And if you're not reading, if you're not listening, and your interaction with other people is through this medium of social media, then your communication will not hold up. It can't stand up to what is needed in this moment if we're talking about multiplicity, because you don't have even the language, you don't have references for it.
That's very interesting. You just added a third comment to my list on social media. But let me start with the first. I was thinking about the school system and the discussion we just had with the beginning in education and how to teach children tolerance, for example. And when I went to school, I'm 28, so that's not too long ago at least, but let's say 15 years ago in Germany, there was a religion lesson, and it was separated between Catholic and Protestant baptized pupils, and there was no other religion lesson. So people who have other religions weren't even represented. They just had a free hour, or they went to an ethics class where everyone just went in who didn't match the Catholic or Protestant lesson. So I think that's also something very important, that everyone just sits together in the same lesson, learning about any religion. Like, there can be Buddhism, there can be Islam, there can be any religion in the world, and you should just like cultivate the tolerance for anyone to have any religion, no matter where they come from. So also German people could learn that they can have a Buddhist religion, or have, I don't know, can be Muslims or whatever. So that for me is also a beginning to reduce those prejudices and those strong opinions people have, even though they don't even know anything about the religion. So that's the first thing I think is very important. And I think it's getting better already. I know that my sister-in-law, for example, her children already have books where people from all over the world, all skin colors, all like different hats of different religions are represented. So even like 3-year-old children, they have colored books with different people, and they see different people like growing up together, which I really like because I think it's like really good to cultivate that sense of community. Yeah, and the social media point, I think, even adds to the school and cultural exchange point, because in my experience, I went on cultural exchange during school and also university, and that totally changed my social media feed because getting to know people from all over the world and having friends on social media from all over the world also changes your algorithm and what you get into your feed. So automatically you get more information from all over the world, from other cultures and stuff like that. So I think the exchange part is always very, very important to like decrease barriers and everything like that. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I may add one thing, because I think that has considerably changed in Germany, because now there are a lot of Islamic organizations who are acknowledged as the German system is a bit complicated, because we don't have we have a secular system, which means that the religious organizations are so-called Körperschaften des öffentlichen Rechtes. That means a body of public law, and that entitles them to religious education in the school system. They do it by themselves, but they are in a way protected and supported by the state. State even pays for this religious education. State in Germany also pays for the Catholic bishops, or for the Protestant bishops. And I always used to think that this system in France is much better, where they have the separation between the state and religion, and Germany is so messed up. But in a way, it is a good idea, because then you integrate the religious players into the democratic system of the Federal Republic, and there is an exchange. There is an exchange about the religious education too. How should that be? That religious education, you have to like fill in the form of certain standards of education and so on. I think that is not that system is actually preventing a lot of forms of extremism. And now maybe one should have some kind of more interreligious discourse in the school. I'm absolutely for that, but nevertheless, the moment where it is completely normal for the pupils that they go to the Catholic or they go to the Protestant education or lesson, or they go to the Islamic lesson, or they go to ethics or they do nothing when they are not religious at all, which are actually more and more people in Germany. That gives them the idea that there is a lot of difference.
And to your point about the social media, I agree with you. I mean, I wasn't saying don't. I'm saying that can't be your only source, especially for these young people. But I have learned so much about the world through social media, and like you, cultivated friends. And also look at the social movements that we have all benefited from through social media. You know, that to me is the most important thing. The organizing that is done there is invaluable, really.
Thank you so much for being here. Really enjoyed the talk and the question and answer session, and welcome back after 3 decades in the United States. I'm curious, particularly just given Germany's reunification period and the implications of that, how that has impacted the discourse on immigration, integration, and moving forward, particularly as the left continues to split in Germany, what your perspective is on this moving forward, particularly with how voting is taking place in the East and reflecting the far right.
I mean, there still is a very, very big difference between the former western counties of Germany and the eastern counties, which you can see in the recent elections. I mean, point is that all the eastern counties lost people, and that is not considered to be migration. And I think that should be considered migration, because like around 2 million people after the reunification moved from the eastern counties to the west. So they lost a lot of people. Actually, Mecklenburg-Vorpommern lost 25% of its population. If you compare it to '89, all of them lost except Brandenburg. That is like approximately the same, but that has to do because it is like near to Berlin, and that is near to the metropolis actually. And so you have counties where the people, where actually they lost 25% of the population, so they desperate need of people coming to Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, for example, because they even when they're economically not so well off in certain parts regionally, they need people to fill positions from, I don't know, from very low work to doctors, you know, and nevertheless, 30% of the people in Thuringia vote for AfD. In this case, is led by Björn Höcke, who is a Nazi. It's nothing to say about him. He's actually a Nazi. And that is something very disturbing. What is happening there? So there is this process where there's some kind of encapsulation of these parts of Germany, where they are. You can explain it by saying they are in protest because they still feel as second-class citizens, and they were discriminated against because of their Eastern origin, and you can and they are not even it's not even possible to apply for Eastern Germans to anti-discrimination law because they are not considered to be an ethnic group. So that is a point which is right. There has been a problem in the reunification because there was some kind of it's a colonizing effect, but nevertheless it was like they were simply like eaten up into the Federal Republic of Germany. But nevertheless, that doesn't explain it at all. And if you look at other regions, you can compare it to more rural regions in the West, where there's the same problem. They lose population and they're completely opposed to immigration. And I mean, that has to be addressed, especially by politics. Actually, it has to be investigated. It is a complicated thing. I don't know what it is exactly, but actually, maybe it is like what makes Trump attractive to young white males who I mean there's this thing in the US that the expectancy of life actually doesn't progress anymore with white young male who don't have a formal education. So, and they are a group who are attracted by these movements because they think of themselves as entitled to something better, and they don't see their own failure in this, and they think it is a structural problem, and they should be better off, and they vote for populist parties. But that is not all. That is not all. It doesn't explain it all. And there is still this East-West thing, especially when it comes to the Green Party. So there is the idea that there is a decadent Western urban culture where there is no gender difference anymore, and they all have their completely outrageously priced frappuccinos and they're talking about the climate the whole day. And the AfD actually did one advertisement, and it says, "Your car would vote AfD." Yeah? And really, that was the first moment where I thought, yeah, my car too. I think my car too, because there is this whole thing where a country which is so heavily dependent on automobile industries make driving in an urban environment a living hell for you. So, and why is that? Why do we do that? And we have a completely failed train system. Yeah, that should work. It doesn't work at all. It is. The Deutsche Bahn was punctual someday. Now it is like it's a catastrophe. And so you want people not to drive, but you don't give them a functioning public transportation system, and that makes people you have the impression that you go crazy about that. Yeah. So my car would vote AfD too, and that is like something which is even more in the East than it is in the West, because they see the Western urban culture as something that is absolutely not their lifestyle. But you may have the same in the U.S.
Absolutely. Although I will say the grass is greener, because I think you all have a fine train system. I love the train system. I am it's affordable. It gets me everywhere I need to go in Germany. It's comfortable, and I can get food and wine and all sorts of wonderful things. Ride the American. Try to get somewhere on America's trains for an affordable price.
So, following your comment there, I mean, very interesting about. Let's say, a sense of expectations by formerly favored groups in various societies. Your best guess, how do you manage this gap, this gulf of expectations between people who perceive themselves as in decline in a society and whatever the eventual arrival point, not that there is any one arrival point, it's an ongoing process, of course. But how do you manage this peacefully? How do you give these people who at least start from an orientation of perceiving themselves as in decline in society, to give them some sense of hope or peace with wherever they're moving to?
Through more collaboration. I mean, if you look at the let's raise the immigration topic again, because that is the hottest topic, for example, in the eastern part of Germany right now. When in 2015, approximately 1.5 million Syrians came to Germany, as you maybe know. And so they were distributed throughout the Republic, and to eastern, even smaller eastern municipalities too. And you can really see how did the mayors deal with this influx of people? Did they discuss it with the inhabitants of their municipality, or didn't they? Did they try to spread the people around, or did they like find a central dwelling, like to expose these people, and so on? And the point is, when they did discuss it with the people, when the people had the idea that one could find a common solution, when they had a voice, when they were heard, then it went much better than the other way around, when there was an authoritarian central dwelling, and the mayor didn't discuss it at all. And sometimes they actually did this central dwelling because they they actually want to stir up the racism in their municipality. That is a problem, actually. But I think that I think people want to be heard. The people want to be heard. They want to have a voice. And the point is that I think that if you look at there's this book that was actually an American author who wrote that book, If Mayors Rule the World. I forgot. I'm sorry, I forgot his name. But that was an interesting point. When I have a look at what really what functions in Germany, it is often the municipalities, and you go there and you have the mayors, and it doesn't matter from which political party they are very close to the actual problems of the people. So they think their idea of politics is, how do I manage this municipality? And to manage this municipality, I have to talk to the people and hear what their problems are. And you're not able to satisfy everyone, even in a municipality. But if you go up in politics, they don't have any idea what the real problems of people are. Berlin is something like a spaceship now, and they are like concerned with their own promotion in their parties, and the first thing, if there is an election in 1 year. And the Christian Democratic Party will win the election, and they will be together with the Free Democrats in a government. The first thing they will do is a monumental investment program, because everybody knows that Germany needs that monumental investment programs, but they are blocking it because they are in an election fight, and they're like blocking it for 1 year because they want to be in the government, and that is a big problem. That is a big problem. That evidently the decisions politicians make are not in the best of the country, as you said. They're in their own. I don't know if it is their own interest. They are so involved in these fights in Berlin that they even don't recognize what is happening in the country. And that is a problem. So, I mean, I don't know, they should be forced to be 1 day every week with normal people. Yeah, they should be forced 1 day to nothing else. Only listen to what normal people have to say.
Could I also address that? And I'm thinking uniquely about what you said. Well, for one thing, I think, when you mentioned like Trump really garnering the support of these young, white, disenfranchised men, I think Trump plays on that. Yeah, sure. He has no intention of helping them any more than he has intention of helping anyone else in this room. It is a way to stir up fear among a population that sees themselves, to your point, as being pushed aside, as being forgotten. And anyone who feels forgotten or marginalized is going to do whatever they need to do, right? Because they're used to one position, to move back to that. So I think, I said decentering earlier, but really what has to happen is that everyone is in the circle. So we're not pushing you out of the circle, We're just making the circle wider so everyone can have a position. There's a wonderful organization that Reverend Barber, I can't remember Reverend Barber's first name, but the Poor People's Campaign. Because a lot of what we talk about here is also a classist, it's class. It's not, we stir up a lot of things around race in this country because sadly the beginnings, but much more of it is class. And we saw that in Dr. King. He was assassinated because he was making those connections, that this is a class struggle we're in. And if we all join together and understand that, then the ruling elites can't play these games of divide and conquer, which is what we see happening. So if you look up, if you're interested, look up the Poor People's Campaign. Their slogan, because they come out of the Midwest, is from the hood to the holler. So from the, you probably know, right? Far reaches of Appalachia to the urban settings. But that is what needs to happen. People come together like Reverend Barber is pulling folks together and other smaller organizations pulling folks together and saying, look, I'm not your enemy. You're not my enemy. What we are fighting is for equity for all of us, and not the oppression we get from this ruling class that, frankly, as you said, to your point, these politicians are all part of that. None of them are serving us now, although they will stir what you mentioned up all the time.
Yeah, and I think those sorts of sentiments that you're referring to, they just need to be expressed more openly and more plainly in everyday settings.
Thank you for that question. It's a really, it's not one you get often, so thank you.
Thank you so much. So as you've been speaking tonight, I've been thinking a lot about two great psychologists. The first, Bert Hellinger, a German psychologist. Are you familiar with him? Bert Hellinger? Bert Hellinger. Okay, these guys are kind of esoteric, but Bert Hellinger developed an experience that was at first called systemic family dynamics. And what it deals with is the issue of belonging. And it's too much to go into. I just want to offer it up to you and to the group because truly, his work and this other I'll mention integrate with and explain much of what you've been commenting on this evening. And for instance, just Bert Hellinger said that we have it wrong, that the first need of the human being is not to survive, it's to belong. And his entire work is based on that principle. And therefore, and he said this, he said, we are not individuals, we are groups. So all of the belonging that is in me has to be acknowledged in order for me to be whole. And I've been through that process for many years. The second is Clare W. Graves, who in the 50s and 60s developed his theory, an open system theory of values. He was a contemporary of Abraham Maslow. And he took Maslow's concept and developed it into a kind of a neurologic template for value systems. And it's fascinating because it explains a lot, for instance, the issue of these young white men. Graves would say that what's happening for them is they are up against the existential reality that they have no power. So they must find power vicariously. So they are relinquishing vicariously to, for instance, Trump. And that would be the explanation. And that satisfies their existential need in that example. But both of these men are geniuses. And much of what you've been discussing tonight can be referenced and explained by them.
I have to look them up. I don't know. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you for the great discussion. I was born in Dresden, Germany, in the early 80s. Still, the wall was there. So we went back. I have two sisters who actually started speaking German as a first language. Then we went to Bulgaria, where I grew up, and then Croatia. So, and now I'm an American who lives here, works in DC. And on a positive note, because we mentioned a lot about the foreigners living in Germany, I know a lot of Bulgarians who go live in Germany. They leave their family, they learn German, which is a very challenging language. I studied it. And they have a great life there. You know, there must be something that really attracts them to stay there, to leave their family. Like I left my family, I came to America, and I feel very welcome. I like America. So there must be something. And my question actually was, because we talked about all these challenges, but what unites Germans nowadays? Is it BMW? We make BMW. What unites any person who feels German? Not only kids that were born there in a foreign family, and we mentioned the challenges, but what makes them feel good? Okay, I live in Germany, I feel good. There must be something, or have you thought?
I can answer that. Complaining about Germany. Complaining about Germany. That is a very common thing. We do that all the time, and actually it is like everybody does it. It's like Germany. It's a complex thing with Germany. It's not. There was always something about Germany that Germans do. They complain. So and it was a real culture in Eastern Germany, so that like complaining about the government was some kind of checking out what the others thought, because you had to be like a little bit suspicious what they really thought and so on. But it is like a thing we do. We complain, and that makes us very German, I think. It's funny, but it's really like it is really hard to say these days. So I think so the idea about collaboration was always we have to find common ground. So I think that there has to be a process of inventing a new we in the moment when so many people have migrated to and fro. What is the idea of Germanness then? And I mean, so on a kind of everyday level, it works. But if you want a question, or you want an answer about the substance of Germany, I don't know anymore. What that is, except for complaining. But I mean, nevertheless, it is something that I mean, there are certain habits of living in Germany, and you meet people abroad, and you immediately can say that they are German. That is a funny thing, but what it is, I don't know. But it's the same thing with people from the U.S. You recognize them. It's the same. It doesn't matter what origin they are, and that has happened in Germany too. So that in like 20 years ago, the people who have been immigrated from Turkey, they were quite Turkish, and the younger people now, they are not like this. They are, for sure, there's something Turkish, but that is definitely not the same. They became German too, but what does that German mean? It is something different than it was in the 50s. You know.
They like to drive BMW. When I travel to Croatia, I can see a lot of German registrations, but then on the gas stations, I can see they like BMWs. my Turkish friends. I have a lot of Turkish friends.
Definitely, do you know Mercedes-Benz? They actually made an advertisement for the population of Turkish descent in Germany in Turkish, and it was a Mercedes-Benz on a ferry, and it was in Turkish written, "Darling, I bring you home." And that is like, it's so funny. In Turkey, there's even films about, what was the name of that film? Mercedes Mon Amour. And it is a film where a Turkish immigrant wants to drive his Mercedes to Turkey to show it. You know, and yeah, for sure, to show his success, and then it is like a road trip, and actually all these things happen. He has accidents, and when he comes to Turkey, it is a wreck. It's a very funny film. Yeah.
Thank you all so much for participating, for being with us. Thank Mark, amazing. And we have wine and food and fellowship.
Thank you very much. It was great. Yeah, sure. It was great.
Thank you so much.